all of you, and thank you, Imam Majid. If there's that old adage, if you want a job done well, give it to a busy person. And Imam Majid absolutely embodies that. It has been a pleasure to get to know him and to work with you, and it has been a pleasure to go to the Adams Center. It's been a pleasure to visit so many people across this country and learn so much. And I want to say thank you to all of you. And I also want to say welcome on behalf of President Obama, and welcome on behalf of Attorney General Perez. The President's a little busy right now, getting ready for something going on next week. I forgot what it is. And he sends his great regards, and as does the Attorney General. You know, when I reflect on the state of the American Muslim community today, I am reminded of the opening words of Charles Dickens' classic, A Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was an age of wisdom, it was an age of foolishness. It was an epic of belief, it was the epic of incredulity. It was a season of light, it was a season of darkness. As the head of the Civil Rights Division, I am confronted every day with examples of the ugly underbelly of America. Arsons of places of worship, vicious assaults, and sometimes murders born out of hatred. Threats used to drive families away simply because of the color of their skin or their religion. It's easy to dwell on so many of these horrific incidents and ask ourselves what is going on. And without question, we continue to see these challenges, and we continue in particular to see challenges to the civil rights of Muslim Americans, including arsons of mosques, assaults, and other hate crimes. And we continue to have, as I said, that steady diet of cases. We're currently investigating a fire in Joplin, Arizona mosque. We have a trial starting in January involving the prosecution of a man in Oregon for the alleged burning of a mosque. We prosecuted 3 neo-Nazis who burned a mosque in Columbia, Tennessee, and the number of hate crimes has indeed increased since 9/11. But in addition to these concerns about hate crimes, what I hear most when I go around the country talking to you and other leaders, I hear that you feel as uneasy as any time since immediately after 9/11, and perhaps in some cases even more so. Back then, we knew that the violence was perpetrated by the same hate-filled people who, if they weren't burning a mosque, would be burning a cross or doing some other hate-filled activity. But what I'm hearing and seeing with all too much regularity is that in the past few years, the bias has become much more mainstream. Mosques that have been in communities for 20, 30 years, been anchors of these communities, are being met with picket signs and demonstrations when they apply for a building permit. And indeed, as I will discuss, the Civil Rights Division has seen an uptick in these cases. And I know that we all share concern about this, but this is not the full picture of the Muslim American community, because as I said, while we see an age of darkness, and as Islamophobes, we encounter this word all too frequently, it is also an age of wisdom and light, because the story, as you know and as you live, of Muslims in America is a story of success. While a large number of Muslims have experienced discrimination in overt forms and subtle forms, the Pew Research Center reported that 82% of Muslims are satisfied with their lives, a number slightly higher than the general population. Muslim Americans are growing small businesses, earning advanced degrees in record numbers, building families, building communities, enriching our communities in so many different ways. While 22% of Muslims in the Pew study reported that they have been called offensive names in the last year, which is a very troubling figure, 37% said that a non-Muslim had gone out of their way in the last year to express support. While there has been a sharp increase in the number of mosque controversies in the zoning context, it is also true that the number of mosques in the last 10 years has grown steadily and will continue to do so. But we cannot ignore the fact that there are great challenges for the Muslim community, and those of us in the business of protecting those civil rights, I want to make sure you know that we will continue to use every single tool in our law enforcement arsenal to ensure that you have access to equal opportunity in every aspect of your life. Religious freedom is often referred to as our first freedom, because it is the first right mentioned in the Bill of Rights, and because the rights of freedom of belief and conscience are so fundamental. And there is perhaps no element of religious freedom as basic as the right of people to be able to gather for prayer and worship peaceably and without fear of violence. That expectation that people in free and just societies rightly assume was dramatically shattered in August when a gunman attacked the Sikh Gurdwara in Oak Creek, Wisconsin. As you know, he fired repeatedly and 6 people were killed. 3 others were wounded, including a police officer. And we all shared that tragedy because that was not simply an attack on Sikh Americans. That was an attack on all Americans. And we will not tolerate that, and we will do everything in our power. We will do everything in our power to ensure that we bring perpetrators to justice. And regrettably, there have been so many perpetrators. Since 9/11, the Department of Justice has investigated over 800 incidents involving acts of violence, threats, assaults, and vandalism that target Arab, Muslim, Sikh, and South Asians. And we continue to have a steady diet of these cases. And these cases include the arsons of mosques, the attempted arsons, bomb threats, including bomb threats at the Murfreesboro Mosque, which is currently being prosecuted. And we continue to see these activities. And just last year, we convicted more defendants in hate crimes charges than any other year in the past decade. This hate-fueled violence must stop. And people of goodwill are working hard toward this end. We saw it in the incredible outpouring of response in the aftermath of the Milwaukee incident, an interfaith outpouring of support. We see it in the work of Shoulder to Shoulder, a campaign started by ISNA and 27 other national faith-based organizations to reject bigotry and promote tolerance. In 2010, Shoulder to Shoulder mobilized an interfaith coalition that stood together to support the right of Muslim Americans to build places of worship and to condemn the plans of a pastor of a small Florida church to burn the Quran. Muslim American leaders are also playing an important role to protect the religious freedom of people of all faiths, both in the U.S. and abroad. And I applaud the leadership of ISNA in these efforts. I applaud the leadership of Imam Majid and a leading Coptic American priest who recently joined the President's Special Envoy to the Organization of Islamic Cooperation to support the religious freedom of all Egyptians, including the Coptic Christian community. This is critically important, and I appreciate your leadership. And while I noted the success of Muslim Americans in integrating into the workforce, it is also a fact that employment discrimination remains a huge problem. Discrimination allegations against Muslims make up 25% of the religious discrimination cases filed with the EEOC, and we see a steady diet of those cases. We recently settled a suit in New York City that involved the rights of Muslim and Sikh bus and subway drivers to wear religious head coverings on the job. People should never be forced to choose between their job and their religion. We have a long and proud history, and it's a bipartisan history of protecting religious freedom. A history that includes President Lincoln exempting Quakers from mandatory service during the Civil War. And we will continue to fight to protect workplace rights. We will continue to fight in the schools to ensure that the bullying of kids who are Muslim, Sikh, Arab, and South Asian is a thing of the past, because bullying is never a rite of passage. And when we saw the Somali students in a suburban Minneapolis school district being told, "Go home, you terrorists, this is their home, the United States of America." Settlement with that school district and other school districts who are not doing enough to combat bullying in the schools. And so we will continue to do this. And we will continue to confront anti-Muslim bias anywhere and everywhere. And we will make sure that we take a look at our own house to make sure that we are not in any way, shape, or form contributing to the problem. Like all of you, I very, very upset when it surfaced last year that 2 FBI training sessions had sponsored training presentations that contained stereotypical, inaccurate, and bigoted material about Muslims and Arabs. There was also problematic training about Arabs and Muslims led by an employee of the U.S. Attorney's Office. These materials were wrong, they were offensive, and they did not reflect the values and beliefs of the Department of Justice. The Attorney General, the Deputy Attorney General, the President, myself, and so many others were outraged, and a review was ordered of those materials, and we have played a role in ensuring that all of the materials that we use in our training reflect the values and the correct state of the law. And we have gotten so much help from so many leaders in the community to make sure that we do not repeat this mistake. And we are continuing to lead those efforts on training to ensure that the Department of Justice upholds the values and traditions that are so critical to everybody. Finally, I'd like to discuss an area where we are seeing the greatest amount of growth in anti-Muslim activity, and that is the opposition to mosques. In 2000, Congress, in a bipartisan fashion, an overwhelmingly bipartisan fashion, passed a law which protects the rights of all faiths from discrimination by local zoning boards. And since the passage of that law in 2000, we have opened 31 cases involving mosques. And what's most troubling about that is that 21 out of the 31 cases have been opened in the past 2 years. 21 out of the 31, over 2/3 of those cases. We reached settlements in Georgia and Virginia and elsewhere. And the case I want to share with you, and it's a case that I'm sure you're familiar with, is the story of Murfreesboro. I have been to Murfreesboro. What a wonderful community. People who have been there for so many years, leaders, professionals, business leaders, children, adults, a remarkable community. And they bought a large plot of land to build a new mosque because they were growing so much. And they have a right under the local zoning ordinances to do just that. But the mosque, regrettably, was subject to a number of hate crimes, a number of acts of vandalism, and a number of efforts to make sure that they could not expand. And the group of county residents filed suit, making the claim that Islam was not a religion. And one of the saddest briefs we had to file in this state court action was a brief informing the judge that Islam is in fact a religion. It was remarkable that we had to file that brief, and it was equally remarkable that the state court agreed with us, but it did so very grudgingly. And as a result, while the building of the facility began, that was not the end of the story. Because in June of this year, when the building was almost completed, these same opponents persuaded a state court judge that there had not been a proper notice of the meeting in which the mosque had initially been approved back in 2010. And the judge agreed with them. And as a result, he ordered the county not to grant the mosque a certificate of occupancy. In other words, they built the building, but he wasn't going to let them use it and move in. And the county appealed the judge's ruling to the Court of Appeals in the state court and asked the court for a stay. And at the hearing, the lawyer for the mosque said, and I need to read you this quote because it's a vivid illustration of the headwind of intolerance that we see across America. This is what they said to the state judge. The bottom line issue is this court going to put some teeth into the law, or is this going to be the first ruling in the small town of Rutherford County where the court's going to recognize and honor Sharia law? It's that simple. The plaintiff's arguments in this case were followed by at least a minute of sustained applause from the audience, and the court again upheld the decision and said you cannot move in. That was not the end of it, because we came in shortly thereafter, filed suit in the morning, a motion for a temporary restraining order in federal court that same day, and at the end of that day, that order was granted. And I am proud to tell you that the mosque got a temporary certificate. They started worship at the mosque on August 10th in time to hold Eid prayers at the mosque, and they received a permanent certificate last week. You know, I was raised Roman Catholic. The church that I attend is less than a mile from where we sit. And I can't help but notice the parallels between the Murfreesboro case and the anti-Catholic hysteria that gripped parts of this country during various times in the 19th century. You know, if you took the judge's statement that I quoted about arsenals of jihad and substituted canon law for Sharia law, or the Pope for jihad, this could have been taken out of the minutes of the Massachusetts legislature in 1854, when the Know-Nothing Party was in control. The anti-immigrant, anti-Catholic Know-Nothings, 1 million strong, took control of governorships and legislatures in Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, and elsewhere. But in Massachusetts, they gained the entire Senate, all but 3 of the House members, and the governorship. And they proceeded on their mission to, quote-unquote, Americanize America. They dismissed Catholic state workers, banned foreign language instruction in the public schools, proposed constitutional amendments to deprive Roman Catholics of the right to hold public office, and did so many other things. I was taught by the nuns in grammar school, but back then they established a quote-unquote joint special committee on the inspection of the nunneries and the convents, because they believed, and I quote, that the acts of villainy, injustice, and wrong are perpetrated within the walls of those institutions as the result of their immunity from public inspection, unquote. The Know-Nothings believed that Catholicism was fundamentally incompatible with American democracy, and that Catholic immigrants could never be loyal Americans. As a Pennsylvania Know-Nothing leader put it, Catholic principles and practices are in direct hostility to our republicanism. Doesn't that sound silly? Doesn't that sound ridiculous? Isn't it remarkable that people died in anti-Catholic riots and churches and convents were burned to the ground? Well, I hope someday very soon, and I absolutely believe to my core, that the anti-Muslim fears of today will seem so strange and just as ludicrous, because they are. I have remarkable respect for Imam Belul, the Imam of the mosque in Murfreesboro, because he described this process. He has immense faith, and he has immense optimism. And this is what he said in describing the importance of the Murfreesboro decision for the freedom of all Americans. He said, "We are here to celebrate the freedom of religion and that concept of liberty that is a fact existing in this nation. The winner today is not an individual. The winner today is our nation and the fact that our Constitution prevailed." He also noted, "We set an example. We set an example to people everywhere. We can look to people in the Middle or Far East or in the middle of Africa saying to them, America is a role model. Try to learn from us in America." He recognizes that there are challenges ahead, but he says that for every opponent of the mosque that he saw, 2 people from the community come up to him and give him encouragement. And he has received letters of support and even donations from non-Muslims around the country, including from our men and women in uniform who are appalled at the ignorance about Islam that has caused so much trouble. So I am here to you to say that the Department of Justice will always be there with you. I remember in World War II, a pastor, Martin Niemöller, said, "First they came for the Jews and I didn't speak up because I wasn't Jewish. Then they came for the trade unionists and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a trade unionist. Then they came before so many other people, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't one of them. And finally, they came for me, and there was no one left to speak up. And I am here to tell you that we will be there, and we are there to speak up against injustice, to speak up for religious liberty, to speak up for equal employment opportunity, to speak up for the American dream, to speak up for everybody, because we will summon our better angels. And while indeed it is, in fact, at times, the best of times and the worst of times, I come to you with an absolutely deeply rooted optimism, because we saw the death of the Know Nothing movement, and just as we did then, we will see the Better Angels of America summon. We will see people of all faiths continue to come forward to build a better America, to make the case, and to be side by side with all of you, with all of us, because we are indeed one America. And I am so proud to be in this position, to be able to advance the basic concept of equal justice under law, equal opportunity for everyone, religious freedom and liberty for all. That is what we are. That is the